Okay, real talk for a second. Do you think that copy is too salesy? Like, are you reading a piece of copy that you've been told to analyze and stop and say to yourself, if I was reading this as a prospect, there is no way I would buy from it? Or worse yet, are you worried that you're going to present copy to a client and they're going to turn around and say, dude, this is way too salesy? Salesy is the dreaded word, and that's why I want to talk about it. By the end of this video, I am hopefully going to make this a hell of a lot clearer for you so you never have to second guess yourself again. Hi guys, I'm Alex from Copy That, and I am reviving a series that we started a while ago called Copy Post-it. And in this video, we're going to tackle probably the second or third most frequently voiced concern from new copywriters, which is, isn't this type of copy too salesy? There are three things I want to talk about in this video, and you can think of it as 3 lessons I would like to teach. And then at the end of the video, I would like to show you an example of tackling this salesy objection with real copy. And that example is 1, gonna teach you how to make your copy more effective, and 2, it's gonna help you avoid those awkward conversations with clients where they say to you, this sounds like it was written in the 1980s. So let's crack on with it. If you're a frequenter of Copy That, you can justifiably pose the objection, isn't this stuff too salesy? When we look at long-form sales letters, VSLs, direct mail envelopes, long-form web pages, there's a lot of stuff we go through that your initial reaction might be, isn't there too much sales language in this? Doesn't it seem like I'm selling too hard? And it's a genuine concern. I think, personally, if you are looking at a piece of copy and you see that it's got red text everywhere, and it's got a bunch of quotation marks, and there's loads of ellipses, and there's a bunch of hyperbolic language. Personally, I think you're well within your rights to worry that this is too salesy. Don't feel like you're just being a noob by talking about that. It's a very valid point, and honestly, I agree with you to an extent, because there is something huge that most people tend to ignore when it comes to analyzing copy, and that is especially important when you're analyzing copy that seems too salesy. Context. The first thing I want to talk about today is context. Some of the things that you'll read and study when you're learning to become a copywriter are 50 years old, and markets have changed a lot in those 50 years. Markets are more sophisticated now. What I mean by that is they are used to the promises and the claims that used to get made, right? They know what they are now. It's not effective. It's not new. In fact, they know that a lot of the times it's kind of BS. They know that the hyperbolic promises just don't work and never really delivered on what they were claiming. So consequently, from that, the language that was first used to highlight those kinds of claims is also viewed as a red flag. When people see that hyperbolic, salesy language, a lot of the times they do turn off. This isn't the case for every market, but it's a fact that we need to deal with. It does happen. Some of the copy that you'll be reading is back-end copy. That just means that it's for people who are already customers. It's not meant to be convincing new people who have never heard of a company or a product to buy. A lot of the time, back-end copy is to people who already know the company very well, have bought a similar product before, and already have their trust in them. So sometimes if you're reading back-end copy, the context is so important because you don't want to think like, oh yeah, this is how I should write to everyone. Because a lot of the times, no, you don't want to have a back-end approach to a front-end audience. In other words, you don't want to be writing to prospects the same way you would write to existing customers. Some of the copy will have used cultural or time-sensitive references or language or phrases that just doesn't translate to the modern world, and word for word won't work anymore. On top of all of that, some of the copy was just kind of in the right place at the right time. People had a very, very, very urgent problem that was very specific to a certain market at a certain time, and the words around it don't really matter. It was just the fact that it was the first solution they'd ever seen for a problem they had, and they wanted to eat that up. There are all these things you have to consider, because when we look at any piece of copy, when we're analyzing it, we don't always have the full picture. We can't always see the campaign around it. We don't always understand the desires of the market at the time. We can't always tell what phrases were and weren't time sensitive. We need to understand that context is hugely important to analyzing copy, and it's not just as simple as pulling something out from a sales letter that came out in 1980, putting it into another place in the modern world in a different market and expecting it to work. So you may be right when you think, man, this is just too salesy. It's a fair point. The specifics that worked for a long-form sales letter in the 1980s about investing in gold won't necessarily work for a product description selling an earwax remover. But then why the hell do we spend so long analyzing this salesy copy? Well, before we get to that, I want to talk about the second point after context. The second thing I want to discuss are tempting mistakes. When you're a beginner, there are two very tempting mistakes that it's easy to make, and they are at complete opposite ends of the spectrum. These mistakes are as follows. On the one hand, some beginners will completely write off old school copy as too salesy. That's the first mistake, saying that they're the remnants of a bygone era and just aren't worth studying because there's no way any of it is applicable in the modern world. The second mistake, which is all the way over here on the spectrum, is new copywriters sometimes believe that the styles of writing in these traditional direct response mediums are gospel and that they will work whenever and wherever you need to convince someone to do anything. That's not true either. Two very different mistakes, two complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Do not fall into either one, because this leads to two camps forming. This camp over here being sales copy is the trademark of a scammer and is not worth listening to or analyzing. And the camp over here, which is screw everyone else, I'm the best, I know this secret of direct response copywriting because I study sales letters from the 80s and I have the eternal secret of persuasion that I can just copy and apply to anything. And beginners I tend to see get segmented into one of either of these quite early on. Do not do that. We need to moderate. That is where you're going to find the most success. In the middle of these two camps, understanding that there is a big asterisk next to the points that we make in copywriting, and when it comes to salesy language and analyzing it, there is a huge asterisk there. At this point, you may be thinking, right, what is the right way to think about salesy copy then? Is it helpful or isn't it? Is it worth studying? How do I make it work in the real world? And this is where I come to the third and the most important point, which is when it comes to effective copywriting, it is not the words you use, it is the message you convey. I'm going to say that again. It is not the words you use, it is the message that you convey. Look, there is no one style of copy that works everywhere in every situation. And ultimately, we only know what works by testing. But there is something that never changes. And I'm not talking about a style, I'm not talking about writing conversationally or hard selling or setting copy up in a certain way. There is one thing that never changes: human psychology. In other words, the basic principles of persuasion. The core psychological desires and fears that drove people 50 years ago still drive people today. And that is very helpful for us as copywriters because it means that we can still use them. The desire to be admired, to belong to a group, to move away from uncertainty. Understanding what about different pieces of copy is harnessing these things is why it's worth studying anything that has ever persuaded someone to take action. So, when we're looking at a long-form sales letter from 1989, what are we really looking for? We're looking for the underlying messages that connected with readers on an emotional level. We're looking for the structure that dealt with a reader's objections in an effective way and then went on to set up a sale. We're looking for the psychological triggers that the copywriter managed to get across in their writing. We need to look beyond the style and beyond the language, which could be time sensitive, too unsophisticated for modern markets, could be irrelevant to the market that we're writing for. We need to look beyond the style and the language and the words used, and instead we need to look for the messages that really made that copy work. Okay, so what does this actually mean? Should I write in the same style I see in traditional marketing, in traditional direct response, or shouldn't I? Should I be using the same language as these sales letters that I see? Should I be using the same phrases that they use? Should I be writing the same kind of rhythm that they write in? Should I be writing in a way that seems like bold red text would suit it well? That depends. Like I said, there is no one universal style of copy that works everywhere. Some markets and audiences in some situations will still suit hyperbolic language and huge highlighted promises. And that comes down to the sophistication of the market that we spoke about earlier. Salesy language in itself isn't a bad thing. It is a tool to be used. And if it's used in the right context, in the right scenarios, it can be very effective. So, like I said, some markets and audiences will suit that hyperbolic language, but a lot of them won't. A fact we do need to deal with is that a lot of people, both prospects and clients, are naturally put off by hyperbolic, salesy language. They've seen it too many times before in parodies of TV and film advertising, in Billy Mays-esque infomercials, in straight up scams. And we need to be sensitive to this fact. Just because a copywriter has told you that a sales letter is incredible and did really well, that does not mean that you should be looking at the specifics of the language that they used and just copying it over. A lot of times that does not work for markets in the modern age. Instead, we want to look at the messaging, what is it actually doing, and how can we translate that to the market that we're trying to serve. A lot of times, if that language does come up, that salesy language, then it is an automatic red flag for people and their guard will shoot up and you'll have lost them. But thankfully for us, it's not the words we use, it's the message we convey. So let's take a look at an example of what de-salesy languageifying actually looks like. How can we still get the same kind of messages across without using that salesy language that can put off prospects and clients? So let's take this as an example. This piece of copy that you can see in front of you in red. You won't believe this life-changing secret about psychotherapy that's saving my patients from years of unnecessary pain. In just a few moments, I'm going to reveal what it is. But first, here's why you should trust what I have to say. Now, if I was writing for a psychotherapist and I presented them with this, I'd imagine you could guess what would happen. They're going to turn to me and say, I don't want to sound like this. I don't like this language. I don't like this style. This makes me sound like I'm trying to scam people. Unfortunately, this is something that a lot of copywriters, particularly new copywriters, go through because they've read these sales letters. They see that this is the kind of language that was used in those sales letters that worked, that they've been told are really good and really effective and the gold standard of advertising, and they try to replicate it. But they replicate it in places which often are inappropriate to replicate it in. And when you're writing for clients as well, you're not just writing for your prospect, you're also writing for your client. At the end of the day, if you've been paid to write a piece of copy, you need to make sure the client is happy with it as well, not just that it is effective. I'm not saying that this piece of copy in front of us wouldn't work. I don't know if it would work or not because we haven't tested it. And ultimately, without testing, we can never know anything for certain. But using my expertise and what I have seen as a copywriter, something like this on, say, a landing page on a website where people are expecting to see a professional is likely going to put them off and make them think that, well, this person isn't professional enough. And this is where we come back to that first point, context. Context is hugely important. We're not writing to someone on a mailing list for a financial newsletter. We're writing for someone who is looking for a professional to help them. Would this work? Probably not. It would probably put people off, but that's kind of besides the point because more relevant than that is, would this get past a client? No. If you're writing for a psychotherapist, I can guarantee you with 99% certainty, they don't want to sound like this. But you're thinking, how do I make this work? Well, let me show you how by saying the same thing, we're using the same message with different words, we can change this. After 14 years of treating patients every day, I've learned something that most people simply don't understand about psychotherapy. And on this page, I'd like to share it with you because I truly believe it will change the way you think about your recovery. That is a de-salesy, languageified version of that first thing we looked at. We go back to the first thing. Big words, capitalized, underlined, ellipses everywhere, trying to be hyperbolic, saying that they are 100% in the know and that, yeah, I can save all this. This is life-changing straight away, even though I'm not actually talking about why you should listen to me right now. This is a salesy version of the second one. After 14 years of treating patients every day, I've learned something that most people simply don't understand about psychotherapy. And on this page, I'd like to share it with you because I truly believe it will change the way you think about your recovery. Is this likely to get past a client? Yes, I would say so, because it's not being shouty, it's being modest. There's no need to highlight anything, to capitalize words, to underline, to use ellipses. But crucially, is it saying the same thing as that first one? Yes, it is. It's using different language and different words, but it's still getting across the same message. And let's just break it down very briefly. After 14 years, immediate proof of authority showing that this person who I'm writing for clearly has experience in this field. Treating patients every day. Again, just adding to the proof there. Not only are they experienced in terms of time, but every day in that time, they have been doing their job. I've learned something that most people simply don't understand about psychotherapy. That right there is an open loop. It's kind of what we call an implicit promise, where we have implied that we're going to be sharing with them what this thing is. We're not doing it right now, but we are going to. And if we look back at the first one, that's exactly what this first paragraph is doing. You won't believe this life-changing secret about psychotherapy. It's stating that there is something to come you're going to learn about. It's having the exact same effect on the reader because the same message is being conveyed. If you keep reading, you're going to learn what this thing is. It's intriguing and it allows them to keep reading. Yet in this second version, it's so much more modest and professional. Move on to the second paragraph. And on this page, I'd like to share it with you. That is setting an expectation. It's this page. That's all you need to read is this page and you're going to learn it. This is also just a lesson in copywriting generally, but I specifically want to compare it to the first one as well. In just a few moments, I'm going to reveal what it is. That's saying the same thing, but in just a few moments, I'm going to reveal what it is. Sounds a bit more like showmanship, like, you know, oh, I have it and I'm going to reveal it. Potentially a client may look at that and be like, I don't want to sound like I'm keeping something from them. Whereas here, we're doing the same thing, which is we're setting that expectation, but instead of saying in a few moments, we're just saying on this page, I'd like to share it with you. It's a nicer way of saying it, but it still gets the same message across. And then lastly, because I truly believe it will change the way you think about your recovery. So there you go. There you have it. That was a brief dive into salesy language, what we mean when we talk about analyzing copy, and why it's not necessarily the language itself that we need to be learning and we need to be copying. It is the message behind the language. It's not the words we write, it's the message we convey. And this is just one example of how we can detoxify that salesy language to keep our clients happy, but keep the messaging effective. Through Copy That, we go through a hell of a lot more of this kind of stuff where we will talk about specific real life examples of changing copy up so it makes sense, so it's effective, and so it works in the real world. All right, I hope this was useful for you guys. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to the channel because we try to come out with as many useful things for copywriters, new and veteran alike, as possible. I would hope that if you take anything away from this video, it's that you need to be open to other ways of thinking. Don't take everything at face value and think that you need to copy exactly from the old school and you can just pop that into another scenario and it will work. Make sure that you are looking a bit deeper at the copy. It's the messaging of the copy, it's not the words. So don't be completely adverse to salesy language because there is so much good stuff and there is so much to learn from copy that has worked. No matter when it came out, no matter what market it was in, there's so much to be learned. You just need to know what you're looking for first. So if you take away anything from this video, let it be that. All right, I'll see you guys on the next one.